What do we talk about?
We talk about the TPRM is broken, but is the risk scoring broken?
It's not just about an attack or something.
We're gonna crack the code. Steph, welcome to the 4th episode
of
All Things Cyber.
Yeah. So, Robin, first time on the podcast. How do you feel today?
Yeah, I'm good actually. We had a good.
A new setup today, yeah.
Yeah, it's different, but you remain the same. You know, we have an anchor man, so that's good.
Oh, yeah. So today we are in Amsterdam, and just to change a little bit, I mean, the first one was in Portugal, second one is London, and today Amsterdam. Not too bad.
At the headquarters of 𝐤𝐴𝐚𝐭.
Oh, nice.
My hometown.
Yoo-hoo. So today, buzzword supply chain. What do you think about supply chain today? How is it tackled by the companies? And because we've been talking to a lot of companies recently and about supply chain, or what they consider supply chain. What do you think is the main takeaway from this?
I think what is interesting to see, and you know, I'm in IT for a long time, but if you look how supply chain is developing now and how everything is connected, it's quite difficult to look at companies as single companies and see you know, if you risk rate them, for example, by a single company, everything is connected now. It's a balance between being pragmatic and connect everything, but also, you know, what risk are you bringing in house, and do you have visibility of that? And I think, you know, companies are quite struggling with that because they connect everything, and everything is so easy, you know, with Zapier and Make, and to connect everything, even if you don't have it in house, but connect to such services. But at the same time, how are you connected? Do you know? I don't know what you've seen with companies doing that, and is it becoming a wild, wild west?
I think so. It's like everyone wants to be integrated in I don't know, share data, or basically use platforms left and right, and APIs, and so everything is really connected. And the problems, or basically the major problem, is like to understand how you connect it, you know, and what kind of data you are sharing, or where is your data? Because before, your data was also sitting in your organization, but today, what I see is that the data travels from your organization to the supplier, but does he stay there? Is he moving somewhere else? Is there anything else involved? You know, that whole supply chain is becoming bigger and bigger and bigger because, of course, everyone is connected. Yeah. So there's like a say. Yeah, they said like you're gonna be eating your own tail at one point. Yeah. So he's gonna come back to you. Yeah. He's gonna bite you. But from a supply chain perspective, it's very much now about understanding how your organization is digitally connected to your suppliers, because those are basically those paths that we are looking at to be able to understand that, you know, what risk you're bringing by doing this connection this way or configuring it this way. So there's a whole new world out there that is not yours and is someone else, but is part of now your organization. Yeah. So it's an extended, obviously, surface.
But how do you think that attackers will look at that? Because, you know, they
love that.
Yeah, of course, there's the obvious ones, you know, to attack Microsoft. But is that a way to go? You know, isn't that they're looking at completely different path and go faster than we are?
What's the point to attack Microsoft or things like this? There's no point. It's like you're gonna go for that little one out there, you know, that is connected, you know, to potentially a bigger organization, and have weaknesses, or their posture, for example, their cyber posture, or their security is not at maybe at the same level, but they will have basically access potentially to the first door, the second door, and the third door, and then suddenly you're in.
And but what do you you know, we both are doing, you know, so many POCs and customers with thousands of suppliers, you know. In the top 5, there's always Cloudflare, AWS, Microsoft, the obvious ones, you know. But so is there a risk to them connected to these suppliers, but, you know, or is it somewhere else?
It's different risk. I mean, we've seen it recently. It was a kind of more operational stuff, yeah. So Cloudflare something goes down, and then half of the internet is down. Just like no one can work. I think that was the worst day in terms of production for organizations, because they couldn't do anything. But yeah, this is, supply chain is not just about, an attack or something like that. It could be just someone who disconnect a cable from a server, and then suddenly, boom, it's blackout. Yeah. So it's more operational, but how this is going to affect the blast radius. Yeah, the blast radius of if something happens, how this is going to affect you, how this is going to affect your suppliers, how the suppliers could affect someone else, and so on and so on. So really, it's kind of like it's probably a chain of what's going to happen. Yeah, and you've seen that many, times in the recent months. Things happening. An airport will go down because some luggage system, whatever, a patch somewhere that will cause a problem, and and potentially someone who's using a supplier to be able to get in, to be able to take the crown jewels. So it's really like a very widespread of techniques, or not techniques, but to disturb, I would say, the supply chain. So it's very interesting.
Yeah, and so if you talk about critical national infrastructure, I was 2 weeks ago. I was in Albania.
Oh yeah.
We're gonna help Albania with critical national infrastructure, and but we're coming into organizations who have no idea yet on how they're connected. They haven't high-level idea, but if you really ask them about the connections and to which services they're connected, it's most of them are blank canvas, and they're gonna have to fill in the gaps.
Yeah. If you go and ask any organization, it's like, do you know who are your suppliers? Yeah, they might have a list somewhere, but do you know about all your suppliers? The ones that are, let's say, the best ones are the digitally connected ones. And then we've seen that when we were talking to organizations recently, and we were showing some results about oh look, this is what we're seeing from the outside, and in terms of like which kind of vendors or you're working with, and they were surprised. You remember it?
Yeah, but how do you prioritize then? That nowadays, which vendors you need to do questionnaires? And
so that's
what is the priority?
Well, exactly. I think that the priority needs to be something combined with, in terms of like your supplier. Is it a critical supplier for your organization for different means? But from our side, what we're looking at is like how they connected to you. Is that digital proximity that we call. And that allows us to be able to understand how suppliers, how the context in terms of how you're using them, and understand how you could prioritize suppliers based on that context. Yeah, some suppliers, they will be much closer to your organization because you're using a lot of their tools or services and things like that. Some other ones you might use maybe just one service, but that could be a very critical service. Yeah, so it's like, how do you use and how do you know which basically your suppliers are critical, yes or no? Is that we're looking into basically that depth of connectivity that exists between you and them, and then we base that on basically that proximity to be able to help an organization to understand what will be the biggest impact if one of the suppliers gets hacked.
But if you look at the digital proximity, it's more than just a risk rating or how they're integrated. But in the end, you want to constantly look into that ecosystem and have a dynamic view of what's happening.
Yeah, because you were telling me just before. Yeah, you were talking about this today's supply chain is broken. Yeah,
I think TPRM is broken.
Yeah.
I think the supply chain is not broken, but TPRM is broken. We talk to a lot of organizations who are still struggling with questionnaires, Excel files, but also regulatory challenges with NIS2 and DORA. And what we see is that organizations are quite immature still. There's a lot of human energy and workloads still involved in getting those questionnaires, getting an understanding of how you're working with your supplier, how you're connected, and then getting the information back, which is often accepted on a trust level, but often driven by legal and insurance purposes. If I have good control over my supply chain and third parties, I might get a better premium on my insurance, but that's not where the risk lives. to my opinion, the risk lives in what's happening today. And if Cloudflare goes down, I want to know how I'm impacted. If there's an outage of AWS somewhere in the East region in the US, suddenly half of the world can't use any payment providers. So how am I impacted as a business? And I'm not going back to those Excel questionnaires or ServiceNow questionnaires where everything is registered to see how am I impacted. So I think that's an important shift we are making here. That you constantly want to know how am I connected, how am I working with them. Interesting, one of our customers is a chemical company, and one of their favorite suppliers to work with in terms of people and culture and how they do things, how they're involved with our customer as a supplier. We did an analysis on them, and in terms of risk rating, they were one of the highest in the whole supply chain. Quite shocking for them, and an eye opener at the same time.
How are they going to go to them and say, "Hey, you have to fix stuff"? Ooh.
You need to fix stuff, right? At least you can have a conversation if you know it.
Exactly.
But it doesn't come from a questionnaire, I think.
No. But that's the thing, is like, questionnaire very static, and you probably do it once a year or something like that, because it's, well, to be honest, quite boring. And but the ability to, you need to continuously check that kind of stuff, from the outside, because suppliers, they change. It's like you change, your surface, they're gonna change their surface, and then one little mistake, and there you go. So definitely, moving more into that part of continuous monitoring of your suppliers, but understanding how they're connected, so then what the impact will be. That's the most important, I think, in here. In terms of like supply chain, again, do you think supply chain is just like, a vendor there? Is it something else? There's more things to a supply chain. Where does it start?
I think
if you shift left a little bit.
I can't even pronounce the name, the shoe something. What happens with the NPM packages?
This one.
They could have picked an easier name.
Yeah, exactly.
But anyway, it was this week, I think, that in the NPM packages.
Another one.
A big one, and then you see that. It doesn't start with your suppliers. It's already started in the code. If you're coding and you're using all those dependencies, and suddenly, I think within a half hour, all the NPM packages were infected, or at least new packages created. It starts already at coding, and then you go from code to cloud to your supply chain. But it's all one.
It's all connected.
It's huge.
It's huge. And then the packages is funny because you're talking about it. On Monday, I was looking at it, and I went to, obviously, GitHub, and I was looking at the GitHub, what's happening there. And it was those fake accounts, whatever, being created to whatever JSON files with some hash stuff in there. And I was just looking at it, and like every 2 minutes, there was something coming in, and it's like, wow. So it's like, okay. So definitely something is working in there. But the impact could be, how do you know if you're using those packages? That's, and are they already in production, So that's interesting in terms of monitoring. So supply chain is not just your vendor, like you're saying. It starts at the code and moves from left to right. And then in terms of what do you think that supply chain, where are we going now with supply chain in terms of cyber? Where are we going with that? What do we need to do better?
I think from where we're going is that we're going to be more connected than ever. That started years ago with OT and cameras and
exactly.
and everything in-house.
There's cameras everywhere. Huh?
Yeah, there's too many.
Too many cameras here.
So we want to connect. Even our watch and everything. So it's going to be, I think, steeply increasing, but the amount of things we want to connect, and we also need to control, but also need to be, you need to be supported by tools and solutions and people around you who can help you prioritize. Because if you log onto a platform and you see that you have 10,000 high priority risks, nothing is a priority anymore. So you really need to. One is a snapshot, of the first time you're doing an analysis of your ecosystem, but then it's a dynamic, changing every day, and a risk today can be a different risk tomorrow. So the whole remediation within, working with your suppliers. And my father always said, work closely with your suppliers because one day you need them. And that's true. So it's important that, it's not, any kind of analysis you do on your third or fourth party. It's, it's to become stronger together. So the whole remediation and working together and making sure that together you're more secure. But at the same time, you also, depend more to each other because, also in our internal processes, we try to automate as much as possible. Then only internally, if you see to how many applications you are connected, meaning to how many third parties and how you depend on them, it's we are buying tools almost every week. But in the end, I think you will end up in ecosystems as well. Like Apple and Google and Microsoft, you choose an ecosystem, and then hopefully within the ecosystem you understand how you are connected. But large organizations, I think often if you ask them to how many suppliers are you connected, they can't answer that question.
No.
But then also to which suppliers you need to have dig deeper and understand how you're connected and what are you using for them. I think they also can't answer them.
No, that's one of the big issues. And the other issues talking to all the practitioners, I would say, they were talking about, so when you have a supplier and there is a risk, and, so how do you communicate that with the supplier? How do you make sure that supplier fix that? And because most of the time, you as an organization, you potentially have much better knowledge in terms of security, hopefully. Yeah. But how do you go to the supplier and say, yes, you need to fix that? I mean, certain suppliers, I can imagine you can apply some pressure, yeah. But some other suppliers, they're not going to budge, yeah. So what do you do? What do you do in those? How do you work with your suppliers to make sure that what you're doing is helping, obviously, your organization, but at the same time you're helping them, yeah. So I think potentially that level of communication on how you communicate with your suppliers maybe is something that needs to change a little bit, And maybe those, we were talking about those questionnaires. Imagine you're a supplier and you receive a question of 100-something questions. Like, do you really want to fill that in? No, it's like, yeah.
But there's others out there who help you fill that in. I think AI is being used more and more there.
Yeah.
But still, it's a static snapshot of a company.
Yeah. Again, same problem. But it's an interesting conversation. It's like trying to figure out how you're gonna, protect yourself and at the same time make others better, which I think is a good thing. Yeah. And I think the large organizations should lead with that. I mean, you're not going to ask a smaller supplier to be the one who leads this. I mean, but you, in terms of knowledge, in terms of practices, and how you're doing your security, is something that maybe you could basically shift on the right to the supplier to help them be better. I mean, if you do better with the supplier, it's not just helping yourself, but you're also helping other organizations that are using the same supplier. It's quite cool, no?
If you look at Gartner and when you founded the company, 𝐤𝐚𝐭, very much focus on the external attack surface, so the 360 view, as we call it nowadays. What do you see? Because we've been looking into all the suppliers connection. Are we still able to look only at ourselves? That's the first party view, and then you look at your third parties, or is it becoming just is it all blending in? How have you seen that change?
Why, it's completely blended. I mean, I mean, if you don't do it, then you're basically exposing yourself to a lot of things, and we've seen that on many occasions. Where even using a supplier, so you're saying, okay, so the supplier have a good security. Let's say they're doing good security. You have a good security, but then just one mistake, just a misconfiguration somewhere could expose a big amount of data. But that's not on the supplier. That's not. I mean, it's more about how you're doing about training, your people to not do those mistakes, because there's human mistakes. Yeah.
You have an example of that? What you've seen recently?
No, well, the thing that I've seen recently is just a configuration basically of an item that was on the supplier side, so in a SaaS platform, and misconfigured, basically exposed the whole list of customers of that specific organization. But that's not on the supplier. Yeah, that lands within your organization because you are responsible on how you configure your supplier. So yeah, it's interesting because it could be a supplier, it could be you, but it could be also that thing between you and the supplier. So resilience. We talk about resilience a lot, in supply chain. And I think the shift needs to be done around, okay, so how do you protect yourself based on those connections? Yeah. So when you have a connection with a supplier, that's your resilience. If something breaks there, well, it could be on your side, but it could be also on the supplier side. Yeah. So you need to look at both angles if you want. And that's the interesting part. Because, when you look at a supplier as a general, yes, you can look at the whole supplier and say, yeah, look at those guys, they're doing pretty well in security. But what about the thing that you are connected to within that supplier? Because you can have, let's say, let's take risk scoring, yeah, or risk rating. Anything like that will say, yeah, that supplier is a A. Yeah. But the thing that you connected to is a F. So
but
how do you do that now?
We talk about the TPRM is broken, but is the risk scoring broken?
I mean, it's like, again, is that general, view of a supplier. But what about you and the supplier? That relationship, that partnership, that integration, that's something that needs to be looked at also, because that's one of potentially much bigger risk. I mean, the closest risk to you. Yeah. So yeah, let's take a really good example. If you have an organization, a supplier, and then you learn that supplier got hacked, let's imagine something like that, and you're using that supplier. So first, in your organization, let's imagine you were the CISO of the organization. Where do you go first? Who are you gonna talk to first?
Procurement?
Potentially, yeah. I mean, maybe GRC teams or things like that. I mean, if you have them, stuff like procurement, legal, whatever. Do we have a contract with them? Do we work with them? Where do we work with them? Who are the people in our organization that work with them? There's going to be a lot of questions to answer before you even get to the facts, in terms of like how this is going to impact us. So that's a really interesting thing. Is like the way you're, let's say, creating CMDBs of your suppliers. Again, we love CMDBs, yeah. So a CMDB of supplier is like, do you have enough data today about your supplier to understand what impact it will have on your organization? Apart of, it got hacked.
No, you need to know how you're connected, right?
That would be the first thing I looked at. Yeah, of course.
If a company got hacked because of the email risk, or you have to have a bad email scoring, but I don't use them for email, I should not care. But if I use applications for them or software, I want to look at the software risk.
Yeah, I mean, there's always two angles to it, yeah, of course, yeah, but that's completely true. And I think that you need to have a mix, okay? You have to have a mix, but in terms of like, like when you have a ransom, attack, let's say, or something on your computer, and you say, oh shit, what I need to do? Well, you disconnect the cable, yeah? That's the first thing you're gonna do in here. It's like in here, okay, we're gonna disconnect the supplier. Yeah, but where? It's like, that's the thing. Okay, it might be that he's not even connected to you. Okay, that's another thing. Okay, maybe not connected, but he's got some data or whatever, about yourself. So you need to understand, obviously, what the supplier's got, yeah, and what kind of data they play with, or they use, or whatever, store, or whatever you want to call it. So this is a really interesting subject. But anyway, I mean, we can talk about supply chain.
We're going to crack the code? No, maybe it's good. We're coming to the end of 2025, and I think the supply chain, has become a real hot topic. What do you think is next on the agenda for 2026? What's gonna make it to the headlines?
A big exposure in AI. That could be very interesting. ChatGPT, or whatever, other AI platforms and leaking information. That would be quite interesting.
They've not been in the news yet, but
No.
Development there is going crazy. Obviously, a lot is being developed with AI,
and everyone is using it. I mean, I'm not giving any hints to anyone, but yeah.
You might have a look at those.
But so I think it's going to be a very big subject next year, and unfortunately, we're going to see a lot of other problems, happening around supply chain.
Are we ready for it? I mean, the knock-on effect, it's huge already. If you look back to Jaguar Land Rover, which was, I think, 1.5 billion knock-on effect, at least. Are we ready for, the companies? Are we resilient enough?
I would love to say yes.
but we're not.
But no. But yeah. But let's how do you call it? We need to go obviously faster in terms of how we're doing things to be able to support our organizations. Again, I'm going to repeat, and the suppliers and the other organizations to make it more safer, I would say, but also more resilient, because it's not just about, like I said from the beginning, it's not just about attacks. It could be anything. Just like I said, a cable unplugged. That's it. So yeah, but it's going to be a very big. It is going to go even bigger, I think, next year.
Yeah, and I think our role in that, we work with partners, and the partner work with the customers, and I hope that supply chain is well connected to tackle those problems, because I think that's very very necessary that we understand it and that we work together to fix it.
I really like the last word,
Yeah.
togetherness. But well, Robin, that was great to be with you today on that podcast. I think it's your first one.
Yeah.
You did well. Well done. And yeah, like always, thank you for listening. And we'll see you next time, whatever location. You want to join us on the next podcast?
We need some guests.
Right? We need some guests. And surprise, we're going to probably do it in another country. So who knows? But yeah, thank you very much. And see you later, alligator.
Bye.